A warm welcome to another episode of SciencePunk Explains the Frame Budget Approach. Last time, we really dug into how the FBA thinks about time, not as a flow, but as a sequence of changes. But, that just opens up another can of worms, doesn't it? If the universe just clicks forward frame by frame, why does it feel like a one-way street? What makes things like, aging feel so permanent and stubbornly final? All right, so to really get to the bottom of this, we're going to break it down into four key parts. First, we'll ask, what are we even talking about here? What's this one-way street? Then we'll look at what the FBA calls its ledger, kind of like its accounting book for change. After that, a really cool thought experiment involving spacecraft to make it all click. And we'll finish up with this idea of paths being buried, not erased. Sounds intriguing, right? Okay, so let's dive into Section 1, a one-way street. Now, before we can really grasp the FBA's perspective, we've got to clear away some of the usual suspects, some familiar ideas about aging that don't quite hit the mark here. Yeah, this is really important. Look, when you and I hear the word irreversible, our minds probably jump to things like, biological aging, getting older, or maybe something like entropy, that idea from physics about things getting more disordered over time. But the FBA is trying to get at something deeper, more fundamental. It talks about an irreversible contribution, like a tiny, non-refundable deposit made with every change. And it talks about path asymmetry, which is just a fancy way of saying that going back to the exact place you were before gets harder and harder. From this point of view, entropy isn't the cause. It's more like a symptom of this much deeper path-based logic. Okay, so that leads us perfectly into Section 2. To keep track of this deeper structure, the FBA introduces a really powerful idea. Think of it like a financial ledger, but for change itself. And the core principle here is, it's actually pretty simple, but it has huge implications. Nothing happens for free. Every single tiny event, the smallest possible step of change from one frame to the next, it has a price. It has a cost. And the FBA calls this cost a budget. It's like a finite resource you have to spend to make anything happen at all. So, okay, if every change has a cost, a budget, how is it paid? How is it accounted for? Well, this is where that ledger idea comes in. For every single step a system takes, the total budget gets split up into 3 different accounts. And this isn't just for bookkeeping, It's absolutely crucial for telling apart the different kinds of change. Like, is it just moving? Is it changing internally? And the big one for us today, is part of that change permanent? So let's break down these 3 accounts. First up, you've got the external account. This is pretty straightforward. It's just tracking changes relative to the outside world. Think moving from point A to point B. Easy enough. Then there's the internal reversible account. This covers changes inside the system that could, at least in theory, be undone. Imagine a ball just spinning in place. You can spin it back, right? And then finally, the one we're really interested in today, the internal irreversible account. This is where the non-recoverable part of change gets logged. It's the part of the budget that gets spent and never comes back. This is what the FBA means by aging. Okay, I know what you're thinking. External account, internal account. This can all sound a little bit abstract. So, for our third section, let's make it super concrete. We're going to use a thought experiment that really makes this distinction pop. All right, just imagine this. We've got 2 spacecraft. They are perfectly identical. Down to the last atom. Let's call them spacecraft A and spacecraft B. And they're flying together, side by side, on the exact same path, at the exact same speed. From the outside, you absolutely could not tell them apart. Their journeys look identical. So if we were to look at their FBA ledgers, what would we see? Well, their external accounts, totally identical. Same trajectory, same speed, same everything. Let's even say their internal reversible changes are the same. But here comes the twist. Let's say spacecraft B is flying through a barely there cloud of micrometeoroids, little tiny space dust. Each time one hits, it leaves a tiny microscopic dent, a change that can't just be buffed out. It's a real physical change. So what happens? Spacecraft A's irreversible account? It stays at 0. But spacecraft B's? Well, it's constantly ticking up, little by little, with every single impact. And this right here, this is the whole point. Both spacecraft are moving at the same speed, so they experience the exact same time dilation from relativity. But are they aging at the same rate? According to the FBA, absolutely not. And this little story just perfectly separates these 2 ideas. Time, that comes from your motion through space-time, is one thing. But this aging, this buildup of real, irreversible internal changes, that's something else entirely. So that idea of an irreversible account ticking up, that brings us to our final section, and it's a cool one. Buried, not erased. We're going to look at the deep down logic of why this all leads to what feels like a one-way street. The FBA uses this fantastic term for it, path burial. And no, it's not some mystical force. It's really just about a growing imbalance. See, as a system goes along, interacting with its environment, collecting all these little irreversible nicks and dents, the number of ways it could get back to a specific previous state just shrinks. The analogy I love is trying to retrace your exact footsteps in a sandstorm. You can see where you're going, but looking back, your old path gets covered up almost instantly. Yeah, think about it. As you move forward in time, there are probably millions of slightly different paths you could take that all end up in a pretty similar future. But to get back to the exact, precise state you were in just a second ago, wow, you'd have to undo every single little thing, every micrometeorite impact, every little bit of heat that escaped, every new connection you made with the outside world. You'd have to thread an impossibly small needle. And so with every step forward, that tiny set of return paths just gets thinner and thinner. It gets buried under this avalanche of possible futures. Which leads to another really, really important distinction. A system might, by chance, end up in a state that looks almost identical to one it was in before. But, and this is a big but, in the FBA, that is not the same thing as reversing time. So, why not? The reason is that development, in this view, is append only. It's like a log file that you can only ever add new lines to. The frame counter, that little step counter n that's been ticking along, it only ever goes up. It never goes down. So even if you manage to perfectly recreate an old photograph, you would have done it now, at a later time. It's a new frame, let's say frame number 1,000,000, that just happens to look exactly like frame number 10,000. You haven't jumped back in the sequence. You've just made a new thing that looks like an old thing. All right, let's pull all this together. What are the big takeaways? First, when the FBA talks about aging, it means something very specific, an irreversible internal contribution that gets tracked in a ledger. It's not just getting old, and it's not the same as time dilation. Second, this contribution, this non-recoverable part of change, is accounted for with every single step. It's a meticulous bookkeeping process. And third, development is append only. The step counter only goes one way, forward. So returning to an old state is not and can never be the same as reversing time. So we've gone through some pretty mind-bending stuff today, right? Which, of course, leads to the big question you should always ask of a new physics idea. Is this just a fancy new language for stuff we already know? Or is it actually pointing to something real, something new that we could, actually test and measure? Well, that question, how we might actually notice if the FBA is onto something, is exactly what we're tackling next time. Bye for now, until the next episode, and stay curious.